Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ann Pickren, and I'm serving as the first of three hosts today as we join with you in a webinar to talk about 2015 and from a perspective of crisis and communication. So we're going to look at some lessons we've learned in looking at various events along the way. And as I said when we were starting today, we had our own little crisis about 10 minutes before the webinar because the three of us who had all worked together on the presentation were trying to figure out who had the final deck and which one and what were the slides. So you guys don't know how calmness kind of took over within about 1 minute. So we just went through our own little crisis here, but it reminded us of a few of the key things we want to talk about. So today we're going to cover the topic, as I said, of year in crisis, and we're also recording this, and we will be utilizing that as a means to share with people through probably postings on each of our respective websites from the three companies here. And we're also going to produce a brief document, a short paper that kind of summarizes not only the content that's in the slides, but the additional content that I'm sure will come out with the three of us as we talk through things today. Before we get going on the topic and my introductions, I'm always one who believes that we should share a little bit of a disclaimer because the three of us, and I'll introduce Jim, Michelle, and myself, we are full of our own opinions of things, and today what we are presenting represents just our personal opinions, and they're stated not so much to reflect our individual employers as they are our content and what we believe in terms of our approach to our expertise in the industry. So please take that and understand that as we go through this, of course, the materials that we prepare might not necessarily agree with yours or your organization's, but there's always some snippet of information that we're sure that you can gather through this conversation. So please enjoy this and find those snippets of information you want. Well, I have the privilege of having two folks with me today that I have had in the past, and as we were talking through what really 2015 uncovered for us, it felt like a great group of people to pull together, because I think that some of the key things you're going to see in crisis wrap around some of the communication components. So I have with me Jim Satterfield, who's President and COO of Firestorm. So Jim, I'll let you give a little bit of your background, say hello before you disappear.
Well, everything I ever knew in my life, Ann Pickren taught me, so that's probably the best thing to say at the beginning. Firestorm.
I'm not that old, Jim. That's kind of offensive, so let's not do that.
An age slam back, that's always good in the conversation. But my background is in insurance and reinsurance and crisis management. This is the 10th year anniversary for Firestorm, and we're very pleased to be with you today talking about this, and we'll share some insights and maybe even share another opportunity that you can participate in. Thanks, Ann.
Excellent. And so we also have Michelle Colosimo here with us, and Michelle represents Black Swan Solutions, and I know that key to them is the fact they provide crisis communications, planning and response, and also recovery from all those human impact crises. So Michelle, thank you for joining. A little bit about your background, please.
Thanks, Ann. So my background is in the behavioral health space. So we're always supporting, working with, and guiding people who are dealing with crises of all sizes. And so that's really what we bring to the table in relation to our expertise and what we have to contribute.
Excellent. And you know, every time I'm around Michelle, and we've worked together and are some business partners between the three of us as well, some of the things I'm always doing is I'm always conscious of Michelle's background. Oh, no, behavioral sciences. What am I giving away, and what should I not be saying around her? So she puts me, you know, not quite at ease sometimes. I'm figuring I'm doing something that's probably a little bit of a telltale sign. So, Michelle, thank you very much for making me feel uncomfortable in anything I do.
No problem.
And so, and now, as I said, I introduce myself. I come to you today more as an expert from communications side because of my role as president of MIR3, and the wonderful set of customers that we get to work with every day. As a matter of fact, I was with one this morning early on here at our headquarters facility, and some of the same conversations that we're going to cover about lessons learned came up clearly in that conversation. So it was a great way. I have a great opportunity to sit with many Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, as well as nonprofits and private organizations that give us a tremendous amount of knowledge as to crises that people face, how they respond to them, and what they deal. So that is exactly what we are going to do today as part of this presentation. So I'll preface one other thing as well, that when Jim and Michelle and I sat down together, we came up with a series of lessons, and we don't necessarily each individually own all of these lessons learned. They're a combination of things, and we really wanted to present what we felt like was a kind of predominant initiative that we saw developing out of 2015. So Jim or Bill, I'll let you forward the slide and we'll introduce the topic a little bit. Now, while we're not going to dig just specifically into this area today, one of the things that we saw along the way through the year is that crises cannot be just cornered into the impact of one particular business or area. They are going to be much broader than that. They're going to impact your business. That's going to overflow into your employees and their families along the way. And Jim, many years ago, taught me something, so I didn't only teach him, but he always talks about every crisis as a human crisis. And when we really look at what that means, it expands our thoughts a little bit more. And this year in particular, while we're not going to talk about individual crises that happen, you're all aware of many of them, and unfortunately they get a lot of publicity in the news and impact us on a daily basis. But one of the things that's very key to that is that we need to focus on the impact to those employees and to their families and their safety. So we're going to take a pass through a few lessons, and as I said, there's a series of them, so I'm going to ask Michelle to start with lesson 1. Now, interestingly enough, so you'll all know, lesson 1 might not be one of the ones that Michelle put in this deck, so we're kind of going to rotate through these and have a good conversation. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you and let you start talking a little bit about the first lesson that we wanted to share today.
Great, thanks, Ann. And I just think this is a great place to start when we're looking at all the lessons we're reviewing, because it's a reality. Crises are definitely occurring more often and are much more common than we think. And suffice it to say, really disasters are really a normal part of life now, which is a very scary thing, but at the same time, having that awareness and knowledge helps us to do our roles better in relation to preparing and planning so that we can either, one, hopefully prevent these things from happening, or two, have a plan in place so we can move from chaos to control more quickly. I think it was interesting, there was a survey that was completed by safety professionals out of organizations in the state of New York. And what they found was, just out of those businesses, 64% of respondents needed to call 911 in the past year. So that's quite high. And 24% they called once, 6% called twice, but the remaining, which was 31%, called multiple times. And one of them called, or two of them called more than 100 times in 2015. So in thinking of that, it again just brings to light this whole idea that things are happening all the time. The other thing I thought was really interesting was why. Why were people making these calls? Now, I think we all can understand the medical related being the highest, but interesting enough that 24%, so the second highest was for crime and violence, which we're seeing more often, and that's even above fires. So just really good content to put this in context for why we're even having these discussions. in thinking about that, what are some considerations? If we're thinking about the frequency, and obviously knowing we want to be planning and be prepared for these instances, we also got to think outside that box. So yes, we might have plans in place in relation to addressing, workplace issues, accidents, violence, fires, but then we got to take it beyond that. We have critical suppliers that help support us in our operations in order to conduct our business. And so how confident do you feel that they're prepared? You might feel confident in your preparedness, but what about theirs? And have you only accepted at the part that, yes, they confirm they have a plan, or have you pushed it more beyond that and actually had them show you their plan, or provide some data to prove that they're testing those plans and drilling it out? It's really important because they are an important piece in relation to your ability to succeed. And if they're failing, that can affect your business as well.
Right. Michelle, I was thinking about this as you were talking, and we talk about crises and communications, and I find it interesting when I talk with people, they don't necessarily label them as crises. They're events or things that happen that are managed, and obviously we hope never move into that official crisis component. Yep. But it is important to think about the reality of how many there really are. And I was talking with someone the other day, and they said, no, you know what, we really have been very lucky. We haven't had any crises this year. And then they said, well, wait a minute, back in February, there was this, and they went on to explain something. And they said, oh, yeah, well, then later in the spring, and then they kind of talk their way through their calendar, and they went, you know what, on second thought, we have supported quite a few. And I think it's one of the things that if people on this webinar are sitting in there going, we're lucky enough we haven't been through this, I would encourage you to track all those things that get escalated and look back at the end of the year, and you'll find some relevant statistics to that. So, and I actually had someone that was telling me they use that as part of their justification back to their executives and to the value they bring back to the organization. Because look, we managed these events and you never had any escalate to you. So there's a lot to be said for that. Jim, any comment before we look to you to give us another lesson?
I think the last two lines on the slide are talking about supply chain failure, and that is the most common failure in a disaster or crisis. And one of the things that startled me this year is we're seeing that repeated with cyber breach, with the risk coming in via your suppliers who have access into your system. So it started in theirs, came over to yours, and it came back in. So that's a fairly significant one for us to be aware of. If we take it lesson 2, we're seeing that companies aren't prepared. Now the statistics are a little strange here. You can say, well, wait a minute, Jim. 85% of these folks have plans, and 90% of them test them. But it's the looking under the covers here to look at some of the rest of them, that you'll notice that 30% never held an exercise.
So Jim, could I ask you to step up closer to the mic because you're fading out a little bit?
Okay, it should be fairly close, and thank you. Is that better? Right.
Yeah, they were just certain times.
I'm just kind of fading away, I think, into this time.
All
right. So 30% of the companies haven't held exercises or drills. If we don't test our plans, we don't know that they're going to work. And look at the next comment. About a fourth held just one drill a year, a fire drill. And so when you think about that, those plans are out there, but will they in fact work? And we also looked a little further at the information that Chip Dawson generated from Dawson Associates, that only half had done a threat assessment, and only 35% did a business impact analysis. If something bad is going to happen, what's the impact onto the company from a financial and operational, from a brand and a reputation perspective? And across the board, in emergency supplies, what you need wasn't considered until too late. California, if you're having an earthquake and you're going to have to sustain your company for a period of time, there's supplies that you're going to need to make sure that you have, and not wait to say we can run down the street and get them in that emergency. So many of the plans are focused around what to do and not how to do it. The quick test you could do is take your plan and give it to one of your newest employees. Describe a scenario and ask them, does the plan tell you what and how to do it? And see if they can hear it out from that standpoint. If they can't, your plans are not actionable. And that's one of the big lessons that we've learned repeatedly, because any confusion in a crisis could then prove deadly. I'd recommend that you get somebody else to test your plan, or maybe you work with another company where you test each other's plans. But having that interaction makes a difference. And you've tested a bunch of plans.
Well, just a few across the years, and I think one of the things that I see is that, you know, I'm looking for a plan that is both actionable but not just horrifically detailed to the point that you just set it aside. Hard to maintain. So there's that perfect balance that people are looking for. And I would say that the other sense of comfort that comes is that when you're testing a plan, and it almost shocks me, Jim, when you mentioned that, you know, most of those tests are fire drills. That's kind of a sad situation to be in, because you do want to test the safety component of that, but there's far more to the types of events that you're going to have to deal with than just, you know, getting out of the building and accounting for people. So there is quite a bit. I love the new things that are coming up in the industry that are allowing us to kind of do virtual tabletops. And Jim, you know, we participated with you yesterday in a virtual webinar that was a cyber tabletop exercise of a cyber breach type thing. And those are more and more in the capabilities of things that you can do. So you have to be a little creative, but leverage the use of technology. And I think that engages a lot of, for instance, we've done that with our remote teams joining us for our test and finding out that we were looking at it very, you know, headquarter-centric sometimes. So a lot of things that you can do in testing, but also I will say I've seen time and again that there's just a lack of fresh new thought that comes into ways to test, etc.
All right, I think we're up to lesson number 3. Michelle, is that you?
We are. That is I. I just, you know, to kind of piggyback off of what the both of you are saying, you know, when you look at the testing and planning and, you know, drilling and really focusing on fire drills, but if you shift gears into lesson number 3, it's just making the point on why we need to drill other things and have plans in place for those other things that are becoming more prevalent. And more specifically, looking at violence. I mean, if we look at this, that's happening more and more often. I mean, we just had that most recent mass shooting occurring last week in San Bernardino. And, I mean, how horrific and scary. And at the same time, you know, what can you do as a business to make sure people understand what they need to do and how they need to do it to hopefully try to protect themselves as best as they can in those types of situations. I thought it was astounding. You know, I was looking at some data, and they showed in 2015 so far there have been 355 mass shootings. And by defining that mass shooting, it's 4 or more injuries and or fatalities. It's 355. That means that's more than 1 mass shooting a day. So it's happening more and more. In schools, you know, we look at that. There have been 29 K through 12 mass shootings and 23 colleges and universities in 2015. So it's on people's minds. You know, it's concerning when, you know, it's not just about you going into work, but when your loved ones are going to work or going into school, you're thinking more about it and wondering what are employers doing to hopefully protect those individuals as best as they can. And this whole nother layer that comes about is this homegrown terrorism. I mean, obviously we're hearing all these stories and they don't have all the facts yet in relation to the incident that occurred last week, but that's a good example of, you know, people are all around and have their ideas or beliefs, and that's potentially contributing or making it much more challenging for businesses to detect and to identify.
Now, Michelle, you made an interesting comment. You just through a statistic bias, and somebody actually was like, how many?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had just read an article or whatever around the number of mass shootings. So would you just repeat that comment there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so in 2015 to date, there have been 355 mass shootings year to date. And that, when it's defined as 4 or more people injured and or killed.
It's amazing. And I'm going to really drill this point home. I just really want to know, was that a North America-based statistic? Was that globally? Do you?
It was a North America-based statistic.
So it could be even higher when you think.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'll let you go back to some of the things you would recommend here, and we'll keep moving.
You know, obviously, we think about what do we have in place in relation to, you know, you can't protect at 100%, but there's measures you can take to try to ensure that safety as best as possible. But the big question is, yes, you know, maybe you might answer the question, I have a program in place to, you know, identify behaviors as to those that might be concerning or potentially something that need to be looked at further in how somebody's presenting themselves in the workplace, or comments they've made outside the workplace, or you know, actions that they've done. But do other employees know that this program's in place? Do they feel, do you have a means in place where they can actually report that information anonymously if they feel concerned? You know, that if somebody knew that they were reporting it, they might retaliate against them, or there might be other repercussions. So what means do you have to give people an environment that they feel safe and comfortable enough to come forward? That whole see something, say something is so critical, but giving them a means if they don't feel comfortable sharing who they are but still want to pass along that information, that they have that ability to do so.
Absolutely. Jim, any comments from your side about that?
Well, I think just to go back to MIR3 and notification, getting the word out at the critical points become extremely important. But today we're faced with a need to have a program to identify behaviors of concern before the gun comes to work. And all that 355 is staggering with 4 or more, but think about how many, if you added 1% or 2 or 3, how that number goes up into 6 figures or well beyond in today's work environment. So this is a significant threat. It's a trend that we don't see de-escalating. We only see it increasing. And I think it leads us back into tying into that communications aspect.
Absolutely. And, you know, Jim, I've been, and I said this just yesterday to someone, and I'll stop and say with, well, let's just say 20-plus years in this specific area of crisis communications and business continuity, one of the things that we always do as a discipline is, hot wash, or lessons learned from any event that we support. And it's amazing that you will find communication always is in one of the top 3 lessons learned or challenges we had, whatever list you're creating, it always comes up on the list. And we always are looking to fine-tune that. So we really need to look for ways to improve communications. And of course, I know you all know, since I'm sitting here with MIR3, that I'm an extreme advocate for the use of automation in terms of notification solutions. And there's going to have to be relevant to the situation at hand, whether it's ring a phone, pop a message on a desktop, or whatever. But communication and clearly articulating the information that you need is extremely important. And the other thing, when I look back this year, and I'll keep this general, but I have heard of issues where vendors really weren't able to deal with large-scale events. So when you're selecting a notification for vendor for automation, make sure you understand the capacity that's going to be available to handle these large-scale events, because when things happen, the Paris events or any of the others, there are going to be a lot of people that are trying to communicate simultaneously, not just in your organization. So just be cautious and watch that along the way. I've also seen these communication challenges result from inappropriate or inadequate training for administrators and for those receiving the messages as well. So it hampers the success of that notification. and it basically leads to just frustration along the way. And when you don't prepare messages, or at least the general content of those messages ahead of time, you're going to have a significant challenge on your hands. So when we take that and we think about, all right, so what do we learn and what are the considerations we want, put a tool in place and test it regularly. So testing once a year is not sufficient to ensure you're going to have the best response along the way. So I'm a big advocate of quarterly testing, and we'll talk a little bit about contact information as far as why that's so important to have valid contact information. And as I said, testing is part of what you need for training, but I believe there's also, it doesn't take much, but I believe some kind of introduction to the automation and technology you're using drives the success an extremely long way along the way. So just think about those when you're trying to make sure you get the value out of your notification solution. And
let me throw one point in to support what you're saying, Ann, about messaging and making sure you have those identified in advance. It's easier to edit than it is to create. So if you have the base messaging together and you've tested those, if you find yourself in an emergency, in a crisis, in a disaster, to do a quick edit on it and get it out in a timely manner becomes much easier. Back to you, Ann.
No, and Jim, you're absolutely right, and I coined that phrase. Jim taught me that phrase in the past, that better to edit than create. And I think that is extremely important because, Michelle, you could pipe in on this too, because the editing piece, as I recall, some of your recommendations and best practices with your clients is preparing those ahead of time and having them already authorized, correct?
Absolutely, because when you're talking about the types of incidents that you might be communicating in, you know, people are, when you're thinking every day and you're not in a crisis, you can come up with better wording, you can have better clarity. When you're in the middle of a crisis, you know, that kind of goes out the window. Your thinking isn't as clear, so it takes you even longer to create or develop that message. So it's exactly what both of you are saying, is having something to work off of makes it so much easier to handle in that response.
Very good. So I think that's a great lead-in, and I kind of implied it when I talk about the reliability of that notification. Obviously, key to having the message is also having the right contact information to reach people. And I addressed this. I just spoke at a group meeting of about 35 organizations that get together in a collaboration environment in Atlanta, and one of the first questions that was asked of me, there were two that jumped up first. One was around response rates or getting traction responding to your automated notification. But the second question was getting valid data and how critical it is, because having only an email address or a work phone for these individuals will play out surely to be lacking in what you need, because the moment you rely on just that one phone or that email address, those individuals that you're trying to reach are going to be away from the office, they're not going to have access to email, whatever those situations would be. So you're always looking for, how do I capture good, sound information, and how do I get as many alternative sources of contact information along the way? And I know you're all faced with a challenge, and we'll talk a little bit later about some of the more global challenges that you're all facing in this, because some of these phone numbers you want or alternate contact means are voluntary, and you're looking for information that people might not be willing to share a little bit in terms of the environment they're in. So I want you to think a little bit creatively around how you can do that and look for ways that might grab incentives. So I have a great example in the next slide that I talk often about, which is that there's one organization that has found a way to grab incentives to provide get employees to provide complete contact information. So it may register them in a drawing for, you know, a company gift or whatever. It may allow them to get information ahead of time that is beneficial to them, such as bonus payouts, etc. And most important, you're just looking for ways to get that information. I had someone ask me, they said, when we had the old days of the call tree, our individual business plan coordinators, whatever you would call them, were able to walk around and actually face-to-face ask for contact information. They could put the personal appeal and plea to get that. And the moment now you're looking to ask people to, here, follow this link, go to this portal, enter your information, and update. It's the impersonal side of doing that, and then the challenge of getting them there. So you really need to think about that. And it goes beyond employees. So it's simply all of those that might be other external resources you need to communicate, vendors, we talked about supply chain, contractors, visitors to your facilities that all need to be incorporated in some way into being able to target those individuals based on a specific location in most cases. And it's kind of what we're seeing. Yes, Jim.
I wanted to add to support what you're doing. In the cyber breaches, imagine if your company's network has been breached and it has to be shut down, or the criminals that are involved are there. You may not be able to communicate with them as you have historically done. That's why having an outside platform, having an outside capability that gives you the access to the information and being able to reach them becomes so very critical. So while it was important and remains important for all the things that we dealt with in business continuity, in the new environment that we're finding ourselves with cyber breaches, an emerging significant threat, this is yet another benefit of having this type of capability.
Absolutely so.
The other thing I would add to it, too, just taking it a step further, is, that whole accounting for people process. The notification system is such a value add to assist you in doing that. But if your information's not updated and accurate, it's going to give you inaccurate results as to those that are accounted for versus not.
Very much so.
And I think everybody on the webinar can hear that I think we're all fairly impassioned on the subject. So, and then moving us on to lesson 6, we talk about how now we're in a different world where one person can suddenly impact and destroy your brand. We saw what happened with Subway, the Volkswagen admissions requirements. Today with social media, one person can hold a press conference with 1 million of their close friends. So that information is out and is available. And so the decisions that they make suddenly can not reflect what the company wants and the actions there. And it would have an impact that could live well beyond the time frame that's here. And so as we see it, we need to establish and train and coordinate what our communications and behavior standards are for our employees. About what they can post and not post, or what they can comment and not on. Again, and I'm not trying to keep the focus on cyber, but we found out from one company that when someone couldn't make a family dinner, they were back at the office dealing with a cyber breach, and that came out as a result of missing a family dinner. So knowing about the rumors, knowing about the negative information will show whether this crisis moves in to be a crisis communications event and can escalate, because today it's much more complicated in the world that we live in with instant access available to everyone at a moment's notice. And Michelle, you want to add anything on that those observations?
No, I absolutely agree with you, and just that I say that comment all the time too when you talk about social media. With social media, things are out instantaneously, so you don't have much time at all anymore in relation to preparing to respond and handle these things. But it also, social media, and in some way, it's a double-edged sword. It can also be your friend because it can give you a lot of information ahead of time to help you in preparing for how you might address situations.
Right. And if you look at, like, from my perspective, from a MIR3 perspective, we're ready. We're like, let's push a message. Come on, let's go. We have the automation. And Jim and Michelle, I think you deal more on the front end, even if those messages are pre-prepared. What is the right messaging? what is appropriate, when is too much wrong, and when is too little wrong. So I think you guys have to hit that one awfully strong up front in terms of if there's a gap in information, it will be filled with rumors and social media, without a doubt. So,
in the old World War II phrase, loose lips sink ships, as the whole aspect of communicating too early. It kind of continues on into lesson number 7 that we were going to talk about, that everything that we used to think of private is now public. Digital communications and smartphones make it that way. That information is out there, and so when someone knows something, they tell someone else, and where do they tell them? They tell them on social media, and it expands exponentially. There are a lot of statistics around that knowledge base, and I don't know if we've got them all into this presentation today, but that's an area that we have to focus on. If you don't have predictive within your organization to monitor your locations with geofencing, to look at the phrases and the words and the streams that are being said, it's startling the amount that's out there. So whenever that's happening, you need to know about it. All of us have bosses. Would you rather to be able to tell your boss or have your boss ask you, wait a minute, I saw this, what's going on? And it takes decades to build a brand and to build a business, but today, only 140 characters can destroy one. So imagine 30 or 40 years down the track with the actual event as it comes together. If we're thinking about these communications, and part of this, and going back to what Ann was talking about, is why are you communicating? And we've found a rule of 5 that works very well here. If somebody says, we need to get this message out, and they say, and then you ask them why. They give an answer, you ask why again. And go through that cycle 5 times. At the end of those 5 cycles, if it sounds like we ought to get the message out, it should go out. That's a great way to eliminate communication when it shouldn't occur. Because many times in a crisis, you'll find somebody says, we have to get ahead of this, we want to frame this argument, and it's not the right strategy for them. Many times those normal communications lines are obviously overwhelmed, and so you need to have the capabilities of somebody like a Black Swan that can have a call center to field for those calls as they come in, to be able to handle the volume, whether it's product recall or a significant disaster that's occurred at your location. So you're going to need some external resources and support from a crisis management, a crisis PR perspective. And again, you want to vet those people in advance and not wait to the moment that you need. You want to plan ahead. And if you're using a crisis manager, ask them what crisis have they managed. Back to you, Ann or Michelle, anything before we move on?
I think you covered it from my perspective, and if Michelle has comments, she can grab them and move on to lesson 8 as part of that.
No, I ditto that, Jim. I think sometimes you don't realize when you look at different types of crises, and how you talked about, crises are defined in many ways, how easily or how quickly you can get overwhelmed internally. We had a university just recently that had some rioting going on, and just that, it wasn't significant. However, there was just so many volumes of calls coming in from parents wanting to make sure their students were safe, and those calls were coming into all different places. That was really hard for them to manage and make sure they had centralized communications and correct information going out, and that's a challenge for many organizations.
Absolutely. You don't think about it in that perspective, but it was true.
Right.
The event itself might not have been a crisis and been managed appropriately, but the backlash it was presenting in terms of communication challenges created some issues.
Right, absolutely. I know Jim's talked a little bit about, just cyber attacks and data breaches, and, this is on the forefront. If we look at, this is kind of covering 2015, this is also on the forefront of people's minds. And it's really, what's so important is, it's not, people have had this ideology that it's an IT issue, it's related to IT has to deal with it. But if you look at the different type of cyber attacks that have occurred, it's bigger than that. There are more departments within the organization that are impacted that need to be brought together, in relation to coordinating these efforts and one, trying to prevent it from happening, and two, in handling it as a whole. I mean, if we look at the magnitude of the cyber breaches, I think each and every one of you in some way, shape, or form has already probably been a victim based on these large-scale cyber attacks that have occurred. What's interesting, though, is that because it's almost like people are desensitized to it, because of that, they're happening so often that people aren't doing anything about it when they're informed, which even makes things more susceptible to potentially becoming a victim or having something happen based on the information that was taken from them. The other thing too is that whole change in mindset. That used to be, well, is it if it's going to happen? It's no longer if it's going to happen. It's when it's going to happen. And so, and most times, Jim, you can pop in here. I like your comments you make about when it's going to happen and what is it in relation to if they don't know about it yet. It's happening or something to that effect, Jim?
Not sure which quote you're looking for there, but Michelle, I think you're 100% right. When we look at this, I think the last report I saw, 1 trillion records have been stolen, and when you think about our population, that means that the chances are that we've each been taken 3 times within it. But a significant percentage of people don't react today. 2/3 of the people do not react when they've been informed that their personal data has been stolen. So this is an emerging threat. The FBI divides us into 2 groups: those companies that know that their data has been stolen, and those companies whose data has been stolen and they don't know it. The average length of time before you're aware of a cyber breach is 240 days. That means the criminals have been inside your company for that period of time in that direction. And so it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when in that area. Michelle.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jim. And taking it a step further, it goes beyond just our planning for a cyber attack of our data, right, being impacted. Ted Koppel put out that book called Lights Out, and his thesis is that the internet can be used to bring down the power grid. I mean, that's taking it to a whole nother level. So when you're looking at planning and addressing, cyber attacks and data in your organization, you've got to take it to that next level. What if on a larger scale something like that happened? What would your organization do? How would you handle operating without energy for weeks? So these things are so important to be thinking about and to be taking them further than we've thought of before, so that you've got plans and strategies in place in relation to addressing them.
Right, well,
okay, Jim, I'll let you pick up with lesson 9, and we'll.
Right. One of the things that we've all had for all of our careers is insurance, both on business and personal levels. And the coverages were property insurance in case there was a fire or disaster at our location, or flood insurance around that, and liability insurance or even E&O insurance. But we're now seeing new kinds of insurance emerging into the market. And historically, risk management and business continuity haven't always sat at the table to talk about. We do risk mitigation, risk prevention, and insurance becomes risk transfer. There are now new insurance policies for cyber breach, and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You need to look at exactly what you're concerned about to see if, in fact, that's covering. Crisis management policies now that are available to be able to provide you access to those resources that you would need. Sexual molestation, deadly brand reputation. This world has now changed significantly, so it's not just what we've always had in place, and it gives us the support that we need in many if we will notify the carrier at the time of the event. As I said, not all policies are the same. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Pretty much when we think about automobile insurance, we all understand that. Once we get into these customized coverages, they're generally manuscript and uniquely designed to fit your needs. And I think you're seeing a falling price point here, where it's now something that should be a significant portion. So if you go back to your vulnerability and threat assessment, your hazard impact matrix, which of those risks are so material, even though the probability is very low, but the impact is so very, very high that we need to look at those exposures. And again, going back to the exercise theme that we talked about, doing those exercises is a great way to identify it, but then take the exercise premise that you have put in place and map it back to your insurance coverages to know where you are covered. We did a cyber breach with a client a few weeks ago, and of the 8 things that occurred, only 6 were covered under the policy that they had purchased. So imagine that. You say, I've got a policy and I'm safe. Suddenly now we find that we aren't in fact safe for all of these reasons. So insurance is certainly a change that we've seen, and I don't think, and we've talked about this for years at the conferences and involvements, that insurance has really been a factor at the table, hasn't it?
No, not really. But I will say that what I'm seeing is that the in-depth risk assessment, is going to begin to develop more and more as a critical component, and one that, through the years, various organizations have come to the table with some kind of tools or techniques around risk analysis and understanding. That's going to really be a focus. So you're going to see a major effort, and I think some organizations, I've seen some pretty simple risk assessments that are not going to hold for what needs to be done now, because these risks are deep in the organization, and they drill into a number of cross areas of responsibility. So
it's the opportunity for the business continuity professional to grow in the organization, to get a table at the strategic, get a seat at the table at the strategic level. And I think it's part of, and we've talked about culture before, but it gives us certainly an avenue to go into that. Michelle, I think we're back to you to talk about how do we know a crisis is happening?
Right, absolutely. Well, if you think about it, when it comes to natural disasters, depending on where you live, you already know that there's a chance that something can happen. There's geography indicators that give you a sense. Hurricanes, you have an idea ahead of time of what hurricane might be approaching and at what magnitude, from storms and earthquakes. But when you think about that too, you have that same type of thing. There are signs as well when we talk about violence occurring. Now, can you predict and prevent every single violent act from happening? Absolutely not. But at the same time, there are things that can be present that could help you in relation to addressing and hopefully preventing something bad from happening. We deal with a lot of employers and workplace concerns or people presenting with behavior or behaviors or comments that are concerning. And so, we say there's risk factors, right, that make you more susceptible to potentially doing something. Now, not one risk factor means that you will be that way, but sometimes a combination of those risk factors can play a role. Being socially withdrawn, preoccupying, for fascination with violence or weapons, refusing to take responsibilities, has got a history of violence, defies authorities and rules. There's lots of things or indicators that may, when you look at somebody that's made comments or behaved in a certain way, you want to start to take a look back at that person and the history of what you know of them and things they've exhibited. As you start to take that look back, things start to stand out a little bit more than you may have realized initially, kind of like what you were referencing, Ann, at the beginning. When you think about crisis, no, we haven't had any crisis this year, but then you start to slow down and take a look at it in more depth and things start to pop up. Same type of thing. And in addition to that, there's other people around individuals. So a lot of times, people know that something might be happening or have a feeling or a concern that something's going to occur, and that knowledge is so critical, and getting those people or having access to obtaining that information can really make a big impact in relation to addressing those issues.
And I think, obviously, as we look on the next slide, this aspect of predictive intelligence, when we think about it, we talk about what the business impacts are when we do a business impact analysis. we don't take that next step to design what's the monitoring, what are the warning signs, what are the indicators here, and what are the triggers that would cause that to have action. And social media is turning to now play that role. We're just working with a client, and they're looking at all 700 of their locations, look at geofencing and monitoring around those, to be able to understand, are they in an area where there's a problem in the neighborhood of one of their locations? Because we're seeing civil unrest and violence come into the workplace. Years ago, we talked about Occupy Wall Street. The other events that we're seeing now with unrest, the events we've seen recently in Chicago and Ferguson and Baltimore, suddenly have changed those things. And we see those comments, even in cyber breach, that those are coming in via social media. So it's another key component, and it's a new lesson learned for us for this year.
Absolutely so. All right, Jim, we're coming down to just a few more moments left and a couple of lessons we want to cover. So
I'll try to be rapid then to fit in here, and now with rapid changes, that aspect, because the world is changing. Businesses that we used to know of that were here and dominating in their space now no longer are a factor. And so what we did 2 years ago in our plan won't work at this time. So having a maintenance program in your business continuity plan, about having it updated, refreshing your vulnerability analysis, your business impact analysis. As we see things rushing to the cloud, it's changed the whole dynamic on an IT disaster recovery plan. And so we need to look at where we are, or we're going to find ourselves obsolete, both in our profession in the business continuity sector and within our companies. And so this emergence of business crisis risk it's a new factor here, because we've seen whole industries disappear literally overnight. Some that even define sectors now no longer exist. So there are significant considerations as we think about the rate of change. Our plans that used to sit in binders now need to be on smart devices in the hands of our employees, because people aren't going to go grab the binder when they have to evacuate, but they will have their phone in place with them. So it's seen that we are turning this world upside down with the rate of change of what's going on, because surely what we did a year or 2 or 3 ago will not be the key driver for us as we look ahead.
Yeah, I would agree. And some of the assumptions that we put together to define our programs and what we're doing are no longer valid assumptions. And the things we thought were, low risk are now very prevalent in our list, et cetera. So we have to keep those in mind. Well, our last lesson learned happened later in the year, and it was one that we anticipated there was some potential, but it all aligns to some of the things that have been going on in terms of this invasion of personal information. And many of you who are potentially U.S.-based companies or employees of global companies that are here in the States have dealt very comfortably under the provisions between the U.S. and the European Union around safe harbor. So data that belong to, or sensitive information that belong to any European Union resident, when that data was transitioned or moved into a U.S. territory, we had certain provisions through safe harbor to protect that information. And this year, those data privacy laws changed. The European Union said no more. We don't agree that safe harbor is an adequate way, and therefore they basically invalidated that and have put in place their own much, much more stringent regulations. And in some cases, within the EU, as I refer to it, there are some country-by-country regulations. So there are a lot of things you need to know moving forward to that. You, as a company, even if your vendor, such as MIR3, holds that content for the purposes of notifications, you yourself have obligations as well. So your vendors need to have a strategy for protecting that and holding in place the European Union regulations as they're going forth, but as well you do. So Bill, if you'll advance that last slide, there'll be a couple of bullets I want to call out very important. So you'll see that you're going to have some changes to make in your organization about how you collect that information if you have here in the States, United States, information relevant to those people from the European Union. So you need to understand, get very close to whoever your data privacy expert is, understand those, understand how your vendors have to upgrade to their contractual obligations to make sure that people like ourselves are definitely in sync with what those EU laws are. So that one's a new developing law that just happened in the last couple of months. We were anticipating and listening closely for that, and there will be more information. As a matter of fact, MIR3 will be sponsoring just an industry-wide webinar coming up in the new year that will allow you to hear directly from an attorney or multiple attorneys the impact of these changes to the data privacy from a European Union perspective and what it means to you. So we're going to offer that up through our external or outside attorneys to you. So that kind of summarizes, Jim, Michelle, the 12 lessons that we thought were prominent, and I think we could all probably add a comment or two about that. I think I'll start, and Michelle, we've gone through all of these. What do you think is the biggest takeaway you would like to leave with the folks on the webinar today?
Well, I think the theme of the presentation is just that, you know, the crises are occurring, they're occurring more rapidly, and they're not stopping, and they're getting more challenging. And so trying to stay on top of that and ahead of it is hard but doable, and using your external partners to be able to help support you in going through these processes and understanding more about what you might be faced with is that starting point, and then you build on from there.
I would agree totally. And Jim, from your perspective?
I think that everybody, when we spoke on each one of the lessons, we were talking about change. And we gave examples: increased violence, new privacy laws, data breach, cyber breach, all of those elements. It's the rate of change at which they're coming onto us. And so we really need to find ourselves in a place today where our plans are dynamic, not static, where they're kept current and evaluated and tested in that light. Because if we don't, the rate of change will make us obsolete virtually overnight. So thanks, Ann, for giving us an opportunity to talk about these things.
Well, you know, I really appreciate everything that you and Michelle have contributed to this. As I sat back and listened, I learned a few things myself, and hopefully we all left some lasting impressions. I think if I look back, it really is that how we, really what we look at as a crisis or in a developing event has to change. We have to be out in front of things a little bit more, and we have to find ways for technology to help us, technology and partners. So I think it's a great message. So Bill, if you'll summarize, I'll just give people a couple of notes in the last minutes. First of all, I think we answered along the way the questions that I saw submitted. We will be providing a brief, as I mentioned from this session. There are some existing materials that you may also find beneficial, and I'm sure that one of the things I always look with pleasure to both Black Swan and Firestorm solutions is, along with MIR3, we are in the business of educating and sharing our expertise and knowledge to help you. And so we all have materials and content that can be of benefit in those given areas. So please leverage us. Look to our websites for information that can help you whatever your challenge is along the way. I thank Michelle very much and Jim for joining me today, and I think that we have some opportunities for some interesting discussions in times forward, but I welcome any comments or suggestions for more topics from any of you to do this. So Jim and Michelle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we look forward to having you visit our website. We will be distributing the brief once it's completed, so we have to give our writers time to absorb what we did today and have it and talked about and place it in our briefing document, and then it'll be out. So thank you very much for attending Firestorm. Thank you for hosting. It was nice to have someone controlling the webinar beside myself today, and we look forward to all of you enjoying your holidays and talking to you soon. Take care, and thanks again.